Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Good evening and happy Sabbath to you wherever you may be if the sun has set. We are really, really excited to have you join us this evening for what I consider to be a really powerful and timely conversation on how we utilize our theology, our spiritual beliefs, our faith practices to fuel activism. I'm really excited to have a wonderful panel of folks who will join us this evening for that conversation. They're going to go ahead and come right on screen right now. My name is Tiffany Llewellyn, and I'm really honored to be able to serve as a part of the Adventist for Social Justice leadership team. We are embarking on a voting campaign and a voting initiative to really mobilize Christians to engage with voting as we are moving towards the midterms. And a part of that is the launch of this new series, our political education series that will run monthly throughout the rest of this year. They will not be on screen, but I do want to just take a couple seconds and shout out our actual team that is behind this entire initiative. We have Dr. Jacqueline Forbes, Dr. Danielle Pilgrim, Dr. Jasper Bernard, and she is also here on this panel, Chaplain Dillis Brooke, along with the rest of our ASJ leadership team, who are really, really the brain power behind how we facilitate these conversations. So I just want to honor them and thank them for their work in this initiative. I'm going to jump in and have our panel come on and introduce themselves. Feel free to tell the folks a little bit about yourself, if there's an organization or a company that you represent. And yeah, just say hey to the folks. Anyone can go ahead and get started.
All right.
Go for it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jason O'Rourke. I am a pastor in Emmanuel SDA Church in Chicago Heights. I'm a trained chaplain. I'm a military veteran. I'm a professor in a seminary. I'm not really sure what else I'm supposed to say. Dillis, I love your glasses. So I think I'm good.
So I'll go next since I got the shout out for the glasses. I am Dr. Dillis Brooks. I am a campus chaplain or education chaplain. I work at Loma Linda University, and I'm also a co-leader for the Just Love Collective. And I identify as a practical theologian. I'm always concerned about the praxis of what it is that we say we believe as people of faith, right? And so I want to talk about what does faith look like in the lived experiences of people, and I'm really happy to be here.
Wonderful.
I will go next. I'm Julius Nam. I'm the director of the honors program at La Sierra University, where I also serve as professor of theology, law, and conflict resolution. I just started this past July, so last month. And before that, I was with the U.S. Department of Justice, most recently in an agency called Community Relations Service, where I was the head of the agency for the last year, where we did community mediation work in civil rights and hate crime space, among others.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr., and I work for Dr. Freeman, LLC. And I am the executive director of the Liberation Movement, where we focus on empowering the Black community through educational initiatives. And I'm so excited to be here on this august panel.
I'm Alexander Barrientos. I am the lead pastor of Sligo Church in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I'm also a PhD candidate in theology, ethics, and politics. And I work with countless community initiatives, and also I'm an adjunct professor, and happy to be here tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dee Fields. I am a senior board member at ASJ. Been working with them, rocking with SJ from the beginning. Clinically, I left practice as a surgical neurophysiologist for the last 16 or so years and moved into capital medical sales. So I also am an activist, a child of activists. So I'm excited for this conversation this afternoon.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. As you all can see, y'all are in for a treat. And so why don't we jump right into this conversation? I would love for us to sort of ground where we start in some definitions, right? So just that it guides how folks are thinking about what we are talking through and how they themselves understand and connect with these concepts of theology and activism. And so I would love for you all to share how you personally define theology, how you define activism. And I would also love for you to make it a little bit personal and share, is there a specific text or story or experience that became the foundation for how you activated your own commitment to social justice, to human dignity, to human rights? I'm going to throw that over to you, Dr. O'Rourke, just because you're my favorite person in the world and my favorite brain in the world to get us started on that question.
Sure. Technically, and by the way, there's kind of a storm that's coming, so if I start acting weird on the screen, forgive me. Technically, theology means the study of God, right? That's what it technically means. For me, theology is a little bit more relational than simply forensic at this point. I'm not trying to be forensic with my theology. I'm really looking to see how I can follow in the way of Jesus. That's where I'm at on my theology. And so when it comes to activism, the idea of being engaged, the idea of being engaged in whatever it is that Jesus would be engaged in, that is how I experience and define activism. I think a verse that really kind of triggered it for me was when I understood that Jesus, in his Luke 4 declaration, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, is that he is declaring the Hebrew Jubilee. When I understood that, I was like, oh, he's just not teaching. What he's doing is actually changing society. Every healing, every feeding, every deliverance, every natural thing that he calms, all of that stuff is a shift for society. And so that is when theology really took a turn for me to be following in the way of Jesus.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else would want to jump right in there?
What grounds my commitment to activism is Matthew 22:37-39, where Jesus says that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind, which is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And so neighbor love for me is what theology is. It is theology is a study of God, and activism is theology, is what happens when our theology rolls up its sleeves and gets its hands dirty. That's what it is for me.
I love that. I love that.
I'll jump on that a little bit. Being born and raised in DC, things had to make sense for the neighborhood. And in church, it felt like we were talking about another world, fantasies about otherworldliness. And in order for love and care to make sense, the imaginary God had to have some form of act. And I think it comes down to Christ. You want to see what God looks like. Christ is the active form of what any theological makeup would look like. It's one thing to speak about theology being the study of God. It's another thing to say, what does this actually entail in regards to all of humanity, all of creation? And why the reference to the neighborhood? Why in reference to the church? Well, they all live in the same space. And And so if we believe in a God who actually reaches people or reaches the world, then somehow the neighborhood has to make sense with each other. And I think essentially the best form of act of God is actually found in what we see in the act of Jesus. And the posture of Jesus is always towards humanity. It's always towards the world, never negating it, never trying to avoid it, always thrusting himself in the interests of what's best for the common good.
Powerful.
What I'm hearing from my friends so far is that theology is activism. And that's how I would frame it as well, that the act of studying God, act of responding to God, act of seeing what Jesus did in representing God, being a human being and being a model for us, all of that is activism, because the study of theology necessarily involves making certain choices as to how we're going to be understanding God and what God's mandate for us is in this world. Because we've seen theology activating evil in this world, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about that. And so theology, our theology is also a direct response to what's happening in the world. And how we respond to the theologies of the world further fuels how we serve as activists in the world.
I would build on what Dr. O'Rourke mentioned, particularly the text of Luke 4:18. But in addition to that, a text that really kind of grounds the work in the theological perspective that I have is around Romans 12, verse 2, to not be conformed to the things of this world, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds. And so a part of my theology, or a bedrock to the theology that is put into action, is to help to liberate those who are oppressed. And so that is the type of theological foundation in which I work from.
Beautiful, beautiful. Dee, I don't know if you want to add here. I have another question that's coming up for me, but before I move on.
Yeah, because my input is simple. My scriptural text, or my basis for what I do, is 1 John 4, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and anyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God, and he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. And I've never seen my loving God not move on my behalf and on the behalf of humans. That is activism. That is God. That is who he is, moving in love.
You know, I really love so many powerful pieces that you all just shared about how you think about, understand, define it, and find your connection to this work for yourselves. And I'm thinking so much about the last 10 years of like ASJ's goal of going into churches and talking to members about the importance of social justice, the importance of this work, the connection of it, and the call that we all have to be on the front lines, or like Dr. Brooks talked about, rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. And that has felt almost foreign or abstract or unknown for a lot of people that we have talked about. And I would love to hear maybe from one or two of you where you all think misunderstanding or misguided teaching came from. Why does it feel so difficult for a lot of Christians, particularly within our context of Adventism, to understand or feel that same connection that you feel, to find themselves and their own commitment to the community, to the work, to even Jesus's work in similar ways? What do you all see as that barrier, and how might you offer for folks to begin to think about. Dr. Freeman talks about this renewal of the mind, and a part of it is some unlearning and relearning. And I'm curious, where might you all recommend folks even begin, so that we can all sort of be on the same page about the necessity, the call to this particular work?
Well, I can speak. I'll speak first here. Just simplistically put, I think our eschatology has become an anesthetic. And our belief in the second coming of Jesus has become escapism. And because of that, we leave the problems of in doing so. I'm speaking as a Seventh-day Adventist from my own perspective. If I wanted to, I cannot know anyone outside my church, and I would have a full life. And so many of us do. We live in a bubble. Our church very much supports that sort of lifestyle. Bring your children to school here, go to church here, have your extracurricular activities be here, come here on Sunday, come here on Saturday. And that community is wonderful, but we don't make time for anything outside of our world. And of course, that's warped our worldview, and a church full of people awaiting for a fix from Jesus, and enormous suffering. That's what's led us there. But what gets us out is a complete.
You were breaking in and out a little bit here, but we heard the gist of what you were saying. I just want to note that here. Pastor Alex, I think you were getting ready to jump in.
As a pastor and someone who thinks a little bit about the buzzwords among certain media outlets, it seems to be, at least within an Adventist context, buzzwords like difference, holy, secular, remnants, this sense of hyper spiritualistic fantasies about being superior than other people. This kind of has created a dichotomy between what we actually see in Christ Jesus. Christ Jesus is postured towards the world, and in some circles, it almost seems that we're taught to not love the world, as though John 3 says God hated the world. But we found a different nuance to the aspect of God so loved the world, right? And maybe there is a hint to that in the idea of having a cosmic conflict, we have become combatant against other people. And I think we've taken a wrong turn to where that might look like, that the more different we are from people, the closer we are to God. And this is precisely what we don't find in Christ. In Christ, we find humanity and divinity. And if he spelled it right, it seems like this divinity, this humanity, poured himself out for the world completely.
Pastor Barrientos just mentioned and talked about taking a wrong turn, and I would agree with that. And I might slightly change the phrase for discussion's sake, that we have the wrong turn has been taking no turn. And what I mean by that is that we have at this point a highly curated set of theologies and beliefs, and also highly curated history that we are telling about Adventism and Christianity. And I think a real challenge right now is that we have a theology that met certain moments in the history of Adventism, but those theologies and emphases, such as in particular aspects of eschatology or great controversy, to help Adventists understand their mission at a particular point in time, such as 1860, 1888, and much of what we have met certain moments, and yet those have in some ways become fossilized in the way we understand the world, and what met the moment potentially in the 19th century oftentimes is not meeting the moment today and is functioning as restrictive agents from engaging in the kind of activism that Adventists did engage in the 19th century, and now those beliefs and those restrictions, those beliefs are becoming restrictions for us today.
Powerful.
I think one thing I would add to the conversation is we focus on Daniel and Revelation, and we do not focus on Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. And the kingdom of heaven is at hand, then the manifesto for the kingdom is found in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. So yes, we live in between. We are looking forward to the second coming of Jesus Christ. However, Jesus established a kingdom, and there's a way this kingdom ought to operate in the world. And in particular, I think we don't understand justice as Jesus speaks about it in Matthew 5, like, the good life belongs to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I think for so many of us, we think of righteousness as a personal sinlessness, when the Bible is always talking about two things from the Hebrew: mishpat and tzedakah. Mishpat identifies this is what the law says, right? Whereas tzedakah is talking about right relationship. So it's both and it's captured in Jesus. And so I think the turn that we haven't taken is back to the fact that the kingdom of heaven is now. It is here. And how people will know that this God is real and would want to spend eternity with this God is if they actually see the kingdom lived out right now.
Powerful. Jason, I feel like you want to jump in here. I'm hearing you in the background.
No, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the early church as this denomination was formed, they were abolitionists, and they actually believed that this nation was because of slavery, not because of Sunday. And then after the Civil War, we had the Reconstruction, and we baptized too many Southerners and did not demand they get rid of their racism. So that by the time you get to 1888, you have the whole issue of Jesus and Christ our righteousness. And when what you're told in seminary is that they rejected it by virtue of they thought it was cheap grace and Sunday law, which is half true. The other half is that A.T. Jones understood that righteousness by faith with God demanded that I be righteous by faith with my brethren, and that included Black people. And so the church didn't want it because it dealt with Black people. And so A.T. Jones becomes the editor of the review. Ellen White gets she gets exiled to wherever the heck it was, Australia. And in the turn of the century, A.T. Jones is dragging America for militarism, materialism, individualism, and industrialism, and religion is gone. In 1916, we get, and this is all documented by Kevin Burton and by Michael Campbell. In 1916, we get visited by the FBI. They say we sound like communists, so we need to change the way that we're handling business. And so in 1917, we take America in Prophecy, the chapter out of Bible readings for the home. And so we're no longer critiquing America for her social injustice. Come 1919, we present evangelism as entirely and only dealing with religious liberty. So all of you people that love to talk about the lamb-horned beast, you've only been preaching about a unicorn for a century. And so by the time you get to 1922, you're sociologically evangelicals, and you have bought into evangelical Americanism, and you are totally defunct when it comes to dealing with, you're not even relevant to West Virginia. Forget Black people, right? So like, you're not, our relevance is totally non-relational. In fact, we have self-supporting ministries that love to say they are watchmen on the wall. And Jesus says, watch, that's one thing. And he says, be ready. And that's two separate things. Watch tells me what's going to happen and the evil that's coming. But half of these people that are on their little self-supporting ministries are not ready because they are not focused on Jesus at all. In fact, to date, I don't know of any Daniel and Revelation seminar in print or in publication or production that has this Jesus center at all. So like for 100 years, we have drugged Catholics, we have drugged women, we have drugged Black people in their culture. We have drugged LGBTQ since the 60s. Like we've drugged everybody, abortion. We've drugged, what's the group? Pregnant single mothers. We've drugged everybody. But all of a sudden, if the prophetic critique gets put back on Adventists, all of a sudden, all the sheep and the tares need to grow together. No, they don't. If you're going to drag Catholics, drag yourself. We are defunct because we like to talk about our eschatology because it has no teeth in real life. And it makes us feel good. That's why state conferences are dying, because they have no teeth in the lived experience of their people. Consequently, the only people they can baptize are far-right people who believe in conspiracies.
I feel like I might just drop right there. And you just, you also sort of touched on a question that came through in the comment. And I mean, my mind is going in a million different places. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. You all are just dropping the nuggets. But I want to highlight this question here. Is our eschatology and evangelical framework overshadowing community activism? Curious, what do you all think about that? Jason,
I don't know
There's-
how you overshadow what you got rid of.
There, in current,
I don't know how you do that.
maybe we can go. Dr. Work, continue, please.
No, I'm just saying I don't know how you overshadow what you got rid of. Like you're not there as a movement in the North American division. I've lived in Europe in Europe as well. You're not there where the suffering is. And if you look at history, the church always grows where there's injustice and suffering, because the church provides the justice and the balm that society does not. But we have managed to somehow remove ourselves from the ministry of Jesus in the name of being watchful of Catholics.
And
we don't make any sense.
I think to add on to what you're saying, Doc, is something very key, and I think it's taken for granted that maybe Jesus Christ as a theme, as an interest point, as the center isn't or hasn't been. And I think for many, this is a struggling component to any theological framework, any evangelical framework. Notice how currently the biggest critiques on any angle is you need the Old Testament. You need the Old Testament. You need the Old Testament. The Old Testament says this. But somehow, just Jesus isn't enough to carry the conversation of what it means to love a neighbor, as though the dead prophets continue to be the overhauling voices that continue to speak for Jesus. But it almost seems insufficient for Jesus to be the one who embodies the very ethos that divine posture has always taken on humanity, that's always meant for the fulfilling of itself for humanity, for all of creation, right? And I'm just curious here, and maybe in any eschatological American evangelical framework, how truly we are interested in Jesus the Nazarite, the Palestinian, to kind of really brew out what it actually means to put out a faith that goes beyond borders, that reaches for the poor, that's able to feed when no one's interested. And I'd just like to venture that beyond these frameworks, I think what feeds a little bit of animus towards the American mind is that we have become spiritual capitalists. And so on that note, Jesus as a poor man is of no interest.
Say it again, Doc. Say it again. Say it again.
How is he able to do that? How do you get a poor man to reach a wealthy mind? It's just it's a whole different sort of mindset, right? And so I'm wondering whether community activism is too much of a poor man's language and just simply not enough for the capitalist mindset to think in the level of Jesus, right? Anyway, it's something to think about. I'm just wondering, are we truly interested in Jesus at all, to be the one through whom we actually find the right framework, right? Anyway, just a thought.
Dr. Nam, I think you were jump right in.
Yes, thank you. For me, the question is, which Jesus are we looking for? And if the focus of our eschatology, of our evangelism and how we think about the world is if we focus on Jesus to come at some point in the future, we say soon, but at some point in the future, unknown future, with really by neglecting the Jesus who has already come, our Adventism really has to be refocused on the Jesus who has advented and being part of the adventing of Jesus in the world today, especially in the world that is suffering, in the world that is oppressed and taken. So much has been taken from them because that's where Jesus' focus was. And so adventing with Jesus in the world today, if that is the eschatological focus, it will not overshadow community activism because it will directly lead to community activism. And our eschatology will be community activism because that was what Jesus did to show us and exemplify for us to be the kind of the disciples that he has called us to be and the kind of church that he has called us to be. And so I think because the focus has been too much about Jesus to come, who is supposed to be doing something in the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary, and is supposed to come soon, but still far in the future, in the way we have articulated the three angels' messages or other parts of eschatology, we have really pushed Jesus into the future. And so therefore, we're not focusing enough on Jesus who has come, who is with us, and who is the locus of our eschaton and our community activism.
If I can build on what Dr. Nam just said, I was thinking about Matthew 6:10, I believe, where it says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And when I think about that, I think about the focus of the earth made new. That if what earth is supposed to be like is what heaven is, right? Then when we talk about justice, when we talk about liberation, that becomes a present and active focus because we want to create a earth that looks like heaven. And so right now, I think one of the challenges that we have is that many of us have focused on getting to heaven, but God is saying to us that we should be working and doing things in such a way that we're almost like bringing heaven to earth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As I'm listening to you all, it feels like deeply sobering, almost sad, really, to sit with this question of, have we lost our moral and spiritual compass when we're talking about, do we want to embody Jesus's way, Jesus who already came and has shown us how we are to live and engage as Christians. And we just have not taken that pattern. We have not modeled that in many ways. And even the existence of the thought or the question just feels so sobering, almost like we have spent so much time missing the mark. And how do we get back on track here? My hope is that this conversation, for anyone who might be listening, becomes a part of their own sort of unlearning, relearning process of how we get back to Christ's method. We love Ellen G. White, and I think somewhere in one of her books, even Ellen G. White talks about Christ's method alone will last. And it's sort of like, what is it about Christ's way that feels so, unattractive to us? It's the only way that matters. And I'm just sitting with such mixed emotions as I'm listening to these really poignant, really powerful questions and thoughts that you all are sharing about how we just need to get back to the way Christ showed us that we have to engage here.
Could I add there that one of the challenges that we have is that we don't necessarily acknowledge how culture impacts us living in North America and in particular the United States. And so when we talk about individualism, when we talk about capitalism, that shapes how we think about our lived theology. Mm-hmm. And so when we're asking people to go against what our culture is saying for us to do, because there's a real price for that. Let's be honest, even if we agree that we should be more active in the ways of that Jesus operated on earth, we know that if justice to survive in this culture, we're in an individualistic culture. And so I think we have to navigate and in a discussion like this is that how culture influences how we make theological and practical decisions on a day-to-day basis. So it may not be that we don't want to walk in the ways that Christ would have us to. It may be that we are scared or nervous and understand that to operate in the way that Christ would, that there are dire consequences if we are to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing that I would... I'm sorry, please. Go ahead, Dr. Nam.
The broad call of our conversation was how theology fuels activism, and to address that and the particular question that you posed us, I'm thinking of the kind of theology that I see in John 1, where it talks about Jesus being the light that shines to all people. And I'm thinking of instances in scripture where we have this sudden emergence of those who are followers and believers of God that are not part of what might be called the mainstream of Old and New Testaments. And yet they are there. The Melchizedeks of the world are there. The Balaams, notwithstanding the wrong choices that he made toward the end of his life, apparently in scripture, nonetheless, he's called a prophet. You have the Magi. You have those who are casting demons out that the disciples are concerned about because they're using Jesus' name. And Jesus says, whoever is not against is with us. And so the revelation, we have to think of revelation as being broader than even Christianity. There needs to be a humble recognition of God at work in the world. That, in my mind, has to be at the center of the theology that fuels community activism. So therefore, community activism is not merely trying to convert others to our way of thinking about God, but being in conversation with others as to how God is working in their life so that we can be partners for God in the world today. So for me, the theology that ought to fuel activism is the kind of theology that is humble, that is seeking to learn from God's revelation in the world today, and not thinking that the canon that we have or the set of what we view to be orthodox, small o, is really the sum and substance of God's revelation.
And now you're shaking the foundation of Adventism now, because we're supposed to be the experts. We have all the answers, right? We are the light and they are the darkness. But I certainly love and embrace all of what you are sharing here. I would love for us to... I'm sorry. Jason, did you want to add something here? I don't know if I saw your...
Well, I want to agree with Dr. Nam just in saying, like, if it's not us against the world, then it's just all of us, right? And that means that everybody gets to be in us, right? And so this is what I mean. In Genesis 9, God says, anybody who kills a human answers to me because I made him in my image, which means post-flood, post-fall, God still relates to humans, not as an abomination of whatever. He relates to them, everybody, as being in my image. So much so that when the Tower of Babel is built, he has to pay a visit because I can't believe my image is behaving this way. When Sodom and Gomorrah is misbehaving, I got to come down and see my people because I can't believe that they're misbehaving this way. So now when you get to Romans 1 and everybody has an understanding of God based on natural law, you understand why, because God is relating to people in ways of image and dignity and worth and value that his special secularized people think they're better than, right? They think these people that have the spiritual gifts, all the Torah and the prophet, all of a sudden they become superheroes on the planet. No, you're supposed to be a blessing to the rest of my people. Here's an illustration. If you read if you read Revelation chapter 5, I'm going to bring myself down. You read Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5, you have the 24 elders, and the 24 elders are standing around the throne, and Jesus has taken the scroll, and they say, you are worthy to open the seal because you were slain and have redeemed us from every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And what I thought about that, I realized that when that song was sung, the people that were around the throne singing it were majority not Hebrew. So the 24 elders aren't even primarily Hebrew, which means there are people up there that are not Hebrew, 24 elders sitting around the throne of God. On what basis? Genesis 9. Which means now I got to look across at my people that go to church on Sunday and realize, no, God has a relationship with them. They're not in apostasy yet. I don't get to put up signs, so-and-so, and say Sunday is the mark of the beast when Ellen White says it's not the mark of the beast until it's enforced by law. I don't get to do that and act like everybody that does that is demonized. I don't get to claim that Pentecostal people speaking in tongues are possessed by demons. I don't get to do it, even though that's not my thing. I may not agree with it theologically or practically, but I got to believe and trust. I have to assume the best of them because God is still relating to them as in his image.
I would love for us to bring this conversation into this current moment that we are living in when we talk about activism and our theology, because we are living in one of the most oppressive moments of our lifetime. Well, I don't know how old anyone else is on here. I'll say my lifetime. And when we are thinking about, just looking at where our society is, the regression of human rights, the weaponization of immigrants, of queer folks, of you name it, Black folks, Latinx folks. We can go through all the different marginalized groups that exist. And the absence of true Christianity, real Christians, or even the ways that Christianity has been utilized as a tool to support, to uphold, even within our churches, within our communities, folks thinking that they can support this administration or support things that are currently happening in this moment because of their beliefs around LGBTQ plus folks or their beliefs around immigration. For example, I was just reading a thread of an Adventist pastor who had been detained by ICE for months, and Christians are on this thread talking about, well, did he come here illegally? Well, maybe God has him in detention for a reason. And it just feels like such a disconnected moment. We are looking at so many Haitians who are now having to be forced back home, or, TPS being repealed for different groups of people. And there is just this silence. There is this absence. There is this total disconnection of our voice, our presence, and the forefront engage in that systemic aspect of activism. A lot of times our churches are on the side of charitable acts where they may distribute food or they may have certain giveaways, and they view that as enough and the length to which Christians should go. And when we are talking about calling out things like Christian nationalism and the harm that it continues to do, when we're talking about engaging systemic activism, a lot of times Christians or Adventist Christians are missing from that work. And so what is the call for folks in this moment? How they think about their own Christianity, how they think about these mandates we're talking about, this theology, this belief, this practice that we are called to. What is the responsibility of us all as Christians in this moment?
I think there's a multi-layered reckoning that has to happen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Can you
hear
hear me
you.
okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there's a multi-layered reckoning that needs to happen. The way that we relate to history has warped our our relationship not the way that we want it to be. We tell it a different way. That's just how we do it. We just recreate it, or we highlight those things that we believe are valuable. So, for example, sure, we enslaved Africans, but we gave you Christianity, and that's what we need to sort of focus on. As Christians, we have to reckon with the fact that Christianity itself was spread through means that we shouldn't be proud of. Rape and pillaging and murder came along with proselytizing the world. Have we come to a reckoning with that? Jason gave us a timeline that we need to pay attention to within the Adventist church. We changed. Something changed. We lost our way, and we haven't reckoned with that. What grounds do we have to talk to anybody about justice or activism when our church is divided and segregated? We all support it. And for the how many hundred years this church has existed, there has always been a white European president. And when they finally did get a Brazilian who is representative of what our church is actually made of, they found the whitest white boy they could find in Brazil. I'm going to say it the way it is. This is not an Adventist group. We are under the Adventist umbrella, but we are not, so I can speak freely.
Yes, you can.
We have a problem that we can't reckon with. We have a problem that we're not ready to reckon with. We're not ready to reckon with actual history, Christian history. We're not ready to reckon with Adventist history. But then we want to continue to bring people into what? Into our foolishness, to tell them to ignore your oppression, to ignore the fact that you're not represented, to ignore the fact that you're not qualified to be leader based on who you are and your color. What are we inviting people into? That's what I'm trying to understand. We're proselytizing the world and we're telling them about Jesus. We're ready to deliver the three angels message when the time comes. But before then, who cares what we have to say? And I don't know when this justification, this rightening of ship is going to happen before it's time for us to deliver the three angels message. I'm confused about that timeline. But I know that the present work that we should be doing is just that, reckoning with what has happened so we can reckon with what we believe now to be true, so that our eschatology can have some meaning instead of just being a means of escapism.
There's thank you for that, there's a generation of immigrants that are leaders of our churches on a playing field, we could say, who by education we mean religious education, Bible, prayer, saving souls, mission. And so there's a generation of immigrants who are faithful members, but that is their education. That is their framework. And so heaven and saving souls is a mindset that has superseded what it means to be civil, what it means to be a neighbor or neighborly in a neighborhood, and actually care for somebody outside of your own tribe. And I think this warping has to be a retraining. And however unsuccessful it might look in particular local churches, it's something that those who are fighting and advocating for an engagement in the neighborhood, that you have to continue. And I think if you are one of those who are listening in tonight's meeting, and you've been trying to get your local church to pay attention to local things and local care and local nurture and education and governance, don't get tired at pushing into making sure that your local church actually cares for your neighborhood. I mean, we can start there, right? And that just means on simple policies that might be affecting systems around your own church that affect your local members. And you just got to keep pushing forward, whether you might not have a microphone or not, but making sure that you're able to engage locally. And even starting at a school is a very simple way too. So It's something that I'm very passionate about because I think about my mother's generation, that without baptisms, you're not really doing kingdom work. And so there's a bunch of members that's the only thing they think of in terms of kingdom work. And you can imagine a generation of pastors who think the same way. And so I'm curious as how to we develop the notion that the Spirit is among us and is doing a great work. And rather than trying to look for God in the Bible literally, we have to learn as a church how to see where God is working outside. And so that's a turn of a phrase we could say that I think could help us out locally.
I want to jump in here to piggyback on what Dr. Fields said, and also what future Dr. Barrientos just said. We've been here before, y'all, and you don't know what you don't know. The social gospel movement that hit this country in the 19th and the 20th century was between 1870 and 1920, right, in the US and Canada, was primarily focused on applying the principles of charity and justice from scripture to societal problems. And that was right around when our society was going through rapid industrialization, urbanization, and it was the so-called Gilded Age of capitalism. So we've been here before. This is not new. And it was the church, right? It was pastors who were getting up and speaking out and pushing back against the dehumanization, the commodification of humanity. And so I think we can go back to doing the things that they did, which is, let's look at what scriptures have to say. One of the challenges I think that we face right now is we can feel good because we do something charitable, right? I'm one of the co-leaders of Just Love Collective, and one of the things we like to talk about is, action creates hope. And we talk about, or we name that charity dispenses while justice empowers. Chris Blake, I don't like that word. I said it out loud. Here we go. Charity dispenses, but justice empowers. Justice gives people permission to push back against systems. Charity makes things available. Justice makes things right. You know what we're good at? Charity. You know what we're not good at? Justice. Because charity means we can give a meal, give a coat, we can write a check, we can go clean a neighborhood, we can go visit somebody. But justice says, let's find out why people need coats, why people are unhoused, why are people being marginalized, what are the systems that are in place, and how do we address it and fix it. Justice asks that question, and then it works to change it. It changes minimum wage. It changes the policies. It changes the zoning law. It changes the lending practice. And for so many of us who have joined this Advent movement, especially for those who are immigrants, to touch on what Alex said, we come into this denomination, people come in here, and we, in 2 generations, we are doing the thing. Like, we are able to make money. We are able to do better for our families. However, we don't understand that we're cogs in a system because we don't know what we don't know. So then we can be like, okay, we want Jesus to come, and we can move out of these neighborhoods. And then we talk about those people without understanding that the systems that creates the us versus them, when they see us, it doesn't matter how educated you are, it doesn't matter which community you come from, you will still face the challenges of the system that is unjust.
It reminds me, Dr. Jamie Colasar, he says all the time that the work of justice is to end charity. And I think that's a really powerful way to think about it. I certainly want to ensure that we get to this question that also came into the chat. How effective can our activism be for Adventists, considering the theology surrounding the LGBTQIA+ community?
That's a question that's really been important to me for quite some time, as I'm sure it has been for many of us here. And the this may just be the second time I articulate this in public, so it's kind of dangerous, I guess, as I think about it. But I will
Please
say,
do so. Please do.
Which is, when you think about Adam and Eve, right, we don't know what race they were and, frankly, what sexual orientation they were, but we can see the story. And you can, in the story, what it's really showing is that it is a couple, is heterosexual couple, and some race, some level of pigmentation of some sort. And we don't ever say that if Adam and Eve were a brown persons or white persons or some other, that every other expression of pigmentation does not belong in God's family. So we have certainly, at least in our public declaration, have said every tribe, every nation, every tongue, every people can be and will be part of God's kingdom. Mm-hmm. So the variety of diversity of racial expressions that were implicit in the persons of Adam and Eve, if we believe that story to be literal, then we also have to believe that the variety of sexual expressions that were in Adam and Eve that we are seeing in the world today are revelations of what God intended as the image of God in the world today. So that has to include, if we're going to be embracing Asians, African Americans, Africans, the Latinx people of the world, and the whole different shades of white in Europe and elsewhere, if that is how we envision the kingdom of God, and we do, at least in our public declarations, then we also ought to embrace the variety of sexual expressions that was implicit in the persons of Adam and Eve, and recognize that LGBTQIA persons and their lived experiences, the revelation of God's image in their sexual orientations and expressions, we ought to embrace as God's will and God's purpose in the world today. And so that I see as part of the Three Angels message. Every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, everlasting gospel are being preached to them and are being preached by them and are being expressed by them. So I think that's really how we have to, in my mind, connect theology, not just as a matter of charity, but as a matter of our understanding of God's will.
Mm-hmm. I just really, and I know others of you will jump in here, I just want to thank you, Dr. Nam, for saying that. I think, we really struggle on this topic and in this area, and strip the humanity and the lived experience of so many of our queer brethren who are among us and those who have left us. And I think it's so important to just bring that humanity back, bring that community back, bring that love back into how we think about our inclusivity when it comes to this conversation or this topic. So thank you for saying that. Any others want to jump in here?
I think when we spend all of our time focusing on who's in and who's out, what Julius just named is such an image of the God that I believe in, that everybody is welcome, that there's no one that's an afterthought, that there's no one that's a mistake or an accident. However, we spend so much time in Christian theology talking about pre-sin, post-sin. We spend so much time talking about and trying to define how sinful somebody is, instead of wrestling with the fact that from the very beginning, when we chose to distrust God, humanity, God is always coming to find us, to bring us home. That is the image of God through the whole of the Bible, that God is constantly coming to find, where are you? Where are you? Come, let's reason. Come, until God comes to be one of us. And when God comes to be one of us, he gets put on a cross because he's always hanging around with the people who don't belong, the people who are on the margins, who are not good enough. And the one that I follow is the one that says there's always room at the table for you. There's nothing you can do to make me not love you. You belong here. And I think that is the kind of theology that allows us not to be charitable, but to actually become engaged with dismantling the systems that oppress and push people out.
Beautiful.
I think just to connect it back to that first question, how theology fuels activism, is that maybe we've been put so much thought into God that we need to just start doing the God thing, you know? And I think that's what Dillis on another side would say. There's too much language that we've added to our frameworks, and we've done it so that we could exclude people. And maybe action is a far more charitable approach, so that it encapsulates the true, posture of how God sees the rest of the world. I think that would be richer.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I know we've been here for, oh, I'm sorry. Go for it, Dee. Now we can hear you. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Totally. Okay, what about now?
Yeah, keep talking. You're coming in and out.
Okay. Yeah. Anecdotally, in my clinical practice, I've run into people who have hair from head to toe, every part of their body. Anecdotally, I've run into people who have multiple nipples, to people with multiple urethras. These people sit with you in church.
Oh, did we lose Dee? It looks like we lose her. She'll come back on and we'll get the rest of her thought. But as we look to wrap up here, I would love for you all to share some practical, and you all have shared multiple different ways to think about this, to engage, to get started. But if you can speak to pastors and leaders and members on things that they can do to start activating their spiritual faith belief, to start activating their own theological orientation, to engage this work of justice and human rights for all people, what sort of practical strategies and tips might you share, not just about the engagement, but also that internal conflict that a lot of people struggle with, that spiritual tension around what I've been taught, what I was supposed to know all of this time? And it sounds like some of what you are saying is that there's so much for me to try to go back and get right. Share any tips that you will share with the different groups of folks who have been listening to us and feel called to do something differently. There's some, I don't know who I'm getting the background noise
That's
from.
me. It's me. My neighbor, the bass. Sorry. I can't do nothing about it.
No, no worries. I didn't realize it was music. We'll take it.
Yeah,
Anyone who wants to get started, no
Okay,
worries.
I'll go. It's fine. I think no, let me not say I think. That sounds too subjective. There is something unique about Jesus because he does not start an organization. And organizations have membership. And organizations have rules. And the question that people ask is not how do I belong, but how do I get kicked out? That's the problem with organizations. And he didn't start an organization. He hung out with people. And he began to love on any and everybody, right? And so that's one. Jesus didn't start an organization. Two, he put people above everything else. He just did. I should stone you, but go and don't sin anymore. Oh, and by the way, I will heal you, but don't do it again, or else something worse is going to happen. Oh, and by the way, You know, I will free you from your demoniac. Oh, and by the way, I will raise your son from the dead. Oh, and let's have the world's biggest fish fry. Like, he puts people, oh, we're hungry. Nobody invited us over for dinner. It's fine. Just grab some grain. We're going to do it. Who cares? Because it's people over everything else. So that's one. Two, I think it's important that we understand what faith is. And I will be brief and I'll shut up after this. Faith starts with a fact, period. Faith is fact-based. The fact is the fact, whether you believe or even know the fact exists, like gravity. You didn't know gravity exists, but it was holding you to the planet regardless. The fact has integrity with itself. At some point in time, two things happen. You either intellectually become aware of the fact and its integrity, or you begin to experience and experiment with the fact and its integrity. It doesn't matter what order, but those two things have to happen. When the experience happens, you build trust. Trust is built in safe, secure, stable, resourced environments. Trust it. If you're a scientist, you know that you learn to trust that your experiment is going to work in a safe, secure, stable, resourced environment. Anybody's ever gone on a date, you know that you're not going to take your significant other to a combat zone on a date. It's not going to happen. Right? So what is faith? Faith is trust-based actions in untrustworthy situations, which means if my situation is perfect, it's not faith, it's trust. If I'm not taking action, it's not faith, it's belief. So now you deal with people that need to be included. Do I trust God enough, to Dr. Nam's point, with the LGBTQ people, that I'm willing to journey with them and show them Jesus, whether I agree or disagree with behavior, and trust Jesus enough that he's good enough to get them in? Do I have that kind of faith to walk alongside, Jethro Bodine, right, and his racist grandpa enough that Jesus, why do I say that? Because people come to the story with a different set of issues and a different history than I do. And Jesus Jesus relates to us, that's the word I want to use. He relates to us from our context, not from a vacuum. Holiness is relational. He takes everything I inherited into context, my situational scenario into context, and 2/3 of you is already predisposed to sin before you even made a choice. And you think you're just going to pick Jesus and be obedient from here to eternity, and you are now suddenly, died and become an angel because you became an Adventist. No. There's a journey that we're on. And if I trust God with me on my journey and my flaws at 52, how dare I not trust God with somebody else and their journey? I don't need to understand the journey, but I got to trust God with their journey. And I got to, at minimum, treat them according to how God treats them, which is Genesis 9. This is my image. And I value them exponentially. And so I will be as patient with them as I am with Jason, whatever the them is. I'm done. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jason. We can just move around as others of you share practical strategies, tips, and where folks can begin here, whether they are a pastor, a leader, a member of a congregation, whether they are wrestling with their own spiritual tension, their own theological orientation. Any recommendations or strategies here to share?
I recently wrote with a colleague, Dr. Michael Mickens, a piece on the priesthood of all believers. And I think that's something that needs to be emphasized within our congregations, because our understanding of what activism looks like generally is narrow. And so when thinking about the biblical precedence of the priesthood of all believers, is that we all come with a set of skills and abilities that God wants to use for his service. So I think it is important to understand your spiritual gift and look to find ways to identify those gifts and to use them and activate those gifts in such a way that it leads to God's glory. So I think that is one of the ways in which people can engage in activism.
Beautiful.
There are plenty of faith groups in your neighborhood that are already doing the work. And if you're curious enough just to look up your local city, which organizations are working with other groups, you'll be surprised how active they are. And if you just want to be curious and interested in what they're doing as it relates to their neighborhood and then statewide work that is always for the common good, you'd be surprised how many religious folk are actually already engaged. So you don't have to start the wheel. You could partner with an organization or some good friends that you have locally that could plug you in, and you'll see how significant the work will be. And you'll realize how difficult of a system we all have to confront, but along with others, that you are not alone in the interest of doing good for others, and you will find a support system that will fuel the activism that will reignite or allow your theology to have greater imagination that's already ready for you to engage with.
Beautiful.
I want to speak to the folks for whom this conversation this evening has been hard, that are struggling and are wrestling with the things that we've named. And I want to say that discomfort that you're feeling is an opportunity to go deeper, to ask some more questions, to wrestle with, why are you uncomfortable? Brian Stevenson, Just Mercy, who the author of Just Mercy and who works in the South with folks on death row. I'm not remembering the name of his organization right now, but he has a quote of his that I often repeat, and he says, proximity to suffering creates empathy. And too many of us live the Equal Justice Initiative. Thank you so much. That's the group that Brian Stevenson leads. Proximity to suffering creates empathy. If the people we spend time with are just like us, think just like us, act just like us, I want to challenge us to start getting to know people's stories. Just spend time with folks that are different on the opposite side of you. Be curious and listen more than you talk, because you don't know what you don't know. And once you start to learn, then hear what Jesus has to say. Because I promise you, the scriptures that we read, the songs we sing, especially around the end of the year, Emmanuel, God with us, God loves everybody, y'all. Everybody. And if that's true, then if we are followers, apprentices to, disciples of this Jesus, then people should know us by our love. And the loving thing is to make space for people responding to systems of injustice. And it's one conversation at a time, one article at a time, one podcast at a time, one act at a time. But if we all do it together, then the kingdom of heaven will truly be at hand.
Beautiful.
I teach Adventist history and Ellen White, and so much of what we discussed is close to me in the context of how Adventism has struggled with these issues. And I think it's important for those who are wondering what to do next, in addition to what our friends have shared just now. It's important to remember that Adventism is really a basket of disagreeables. That disagreement really has been in the DNA from the very beginning. And so it's okay to disagree. It's okay to dissent. And when, in my own experience, when I started to kind of push down that flicker of what I sense to be a moral indignation or discomfort with what the majority in the church or in the world are doing, because I didn't want to be that person who's speaking up out of turn. And sometimes we do that as an act of grace. Sometimes we do that as an act of love. At the same time, if we keep doing that, that's really going to be the death of activism. And so we have in our DNA that disagreeable spirit that led us to say no. There are certain things that's happening in the American Protestantism that is really apostate. And you guys are heading that way. And we're going to speak up, even though you're going to kick me out of your churches. That's what Ellen White did. And so in that spirit, I hope that those of us listening, and including myself, we will see permission and inspiration to disagree with our pioneers at times. Dillis talked about the Gilded Age, and that's the very time that Ellen White said things that are very difficult for me in relation to race relations. And I hope you would stop trying to justify her and say at a certain point, Mrs. White, you were not being the kind of prophetic witness that we needed in the world in those moments. When she said we need to keep people who are advocating for racial equality, that's really not their mission. We should really keep races separate, when there were already laws in our land that prohibited in public spaces segregation. We were not even keeping up with the times. We were really behind the times and really advocating things that really disappoints us. And so I think it's okay because we have that history of disagreement, because we have that history of prophetic dissent in our community, we can prophetically dissent following the best of examples of Ellen White and the pioneers to disagree with Ellen White and the pioneers in our time. I hope that that spirit continues to be nurtured in each of our hearts and be that witness. Jesus said, you will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the world. Being a witness is not simply watching and feeling horrible about it. Being a witness is also talking about it and doing something about it. So I hope that disagreeable spirit is nurtured in a way that allows you and me to be the kind of prophetic witness that God needs us to be in this moment.
Beautifully said.
Hopefully you can hear me now. We're having some crazy weather. Peter, James, and John were fishermen, and Jesus caught them on the lake of Gennesaret in Luke 5. And they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. In fact, they were doing what they were supposed to do all night long. They were putting in overtime. They were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They were fishermen that were fishing. And then Jesus gave them, as the kids would call it, the biggest lick they'd ever seen. They caught more fish than they'd ever caught at one time. But my favorite part of Luke chapter 5 is Luke 5:11, where it says, and then they left everything and followed Jesus. So they abandoned the lick. They abandoned the thing that they were set out to do to follow Jesus. I think my heart has always struggled with following Jesus versus my church, because they've often led me in two different directions. So I think the spiritual imperative now for all of us is to follow Jesus, because he is the truest way. He is the only uncorrupted one. And so whatever that looks like to you, and I know what it will look like to you if you're truly following him, I don't feel the need to pressure you or convince you into activism. I know that if you are able to encounter him, if you're able to see him for who he truly is, without all of the corruption that's been attached to him, Yeshua, for who he is, before he became the Jesus that looks like Kenny Rogers. Our God looks more like Osama bin Laden than Kenny Rogers. Yeshua, for who he really is, when we can confront him and learn to love him. I think that we won't have to convince you to be active. We won't have to convince you to love your brothers enough to stand on the street with a sign if need be, or to protest, or to not buy, or to boycott, or to stand up and speak when others are silent. It's a normal reaction to who he is and following him and getting to know him on a deeper level. And I would hope that our church doesn't interfere with your knowing him by distracting you with all of the Adventist things.
Such powerful reflections and thoughts that you all have shared here. And my hope is that for all of us that, you know, we were here tonight and we participated or we listened, that it reaffirmed something for us. It woke up something in us. It lit a fire for us to all find our place in this work, that it doesn't all have to look the same. Activism doesn't look just one way. Whatever your particular call, your particular gift is, whatever God is calling you to do in your part of this work, is what just doesn't let you sleep at night. That when you look at the state of our country, of our world, whether we are looking locally, nationally, globally, that it wakes you up in a way that just doesn't make you rest. And whatever that fire that's lit in your belly, that's something that was said tonight, helped to spark that, to strike that fire for you, so that we can all get back to being and doing this thing the way Christ showed us that it is to be done. Because there's beauty there, there's power there, there's liberation there, there's freedom there. That's the purpose of our existence, y'all. And I hope that, you know, something that was said tonight makes you emotional, makes you think, makes you reconsider that we have no choice. This is non-negotiable. This is critical work when we think about what we are called to do and who we're called to be as Christians, and it doesn't leave anybody behind. And so I really just want to thank our panelists so much for their care in guiding this conversation, their wisdom in amplifying and highlighting, and their challenge to all of us that causes us to just reconsider, to think again about who God has called us to be, what God has called us to, and this work of justice that we just can't let go. And so thank you all for being with us this evening. This series is a part of our participation in the larger Freedom Summer Movement. That is a collective of multiple organizations who are fighting for justice in this time, who are defending the oppressed, who are passionate about our voting rights and defending our democracy, and ensuring that we are turning our communities out to vote for the protection of so many people. And so our hope is that you will join us. Maybe you are watching this and you're saying, I want to get involved in whatever ASJ is doing. We would love to have you join us. We are just a collective of folks who are passionate about social justice, who are passionate about Jesus and passionate about people, and loving people God's way, and seeing that engaging with systemic work is a part of how we do that. Our next series will be on Wednesday, September 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be discussing political education on issues that impact our communities. And so we hope that you will join us for our second iteration of our political education series. Again, thank you so much to our wonderful team who is leading this work, Dr. Jacqueline Forbes, Dr. Jasper Bernard, Dr. Danielle Pilgrim, Dr. Chaplain Dillis Brooke, and our entire ASJ team. Shout out to our tech support tonight, Ruben, Dee, Shane, Sandra, everyone who is on our ASJ team and really a part of helping us push this work forward. We cannot exist without you all. So thank you so much. And we will see you all on September 23rd. Have a wonderful Sabbath, and please keep in touch with us as we do this work together. Take good care. Bye. Since I'm still here, share, like, subscribe to our YouTube page, follow us, join our ASJ group. We would love to have you just be a part of the conversations. If you are a pastor, on the Freedom Summer website, we dropped it in the chat. There is an entire track for our pastoral leaders and how you can lead your church through Freedom Summer initiatives, whether that is through devotionals, sermons, practical steps and strategies. Please feel free to visit the website, the Freedom Summer website, and join in those calls. Let's get engaged in our communities, y'all. Good night.